Jennie Boters predicted her own death. She told her waiter, A.R. Irvine, "He will kill me just as sure as I am sitting at this table." Hello, and welcome to AZ Unveiled, the place where we deep dive into all of Arizona's dark, spooky, and sometimes straight up weird history. I'm Emily, your resident obsessive researcher and all-around spooky enthusiast. In this episode, we're digging into the life of one of Jerome's most prominent figures, Jennie Boters. She was Jerome's most famous madam and believed to be the wealthiest woman in the Arizona territory. Sometimes she was known as Belgian Jennie, and on occasion, Cousin Jennie. And even more exciting, I have a very special guest helping me out today, Arizona author Tim Wilson. Stick around to the end and I will tell you all about Tim's new book, Spirits Among the Saguaros. You're gonna be excited about it, I promise. Take it away, Tim.
Jennie, also known as Belgian Jennie, embarked on a remarkable journey that intertwined her life with the history of Jerome. Her early years remained a mystery, but her legacy as one of the wealthiest women in the Arizona territory is undeniable.
Not a lot is known about her early life. She was born in Belgium about 1861, and almost nothing is known about her husband, but it is believed that she had one. I'll come back to that later. What we do know is that on August 26, 1882, she had a son whom she named Joseph Felipe Boters. And in 1896, when Joseph Felipe was around 14 years old, he and Jennie set sail for America. They arrived in Ellis Island on July 6th. From there, they traveled on to Chicago, but it would only be a brief stay for Jennie. She left her son at St. Ignatius School with the nuns, and she headed out west.
Arriving in Jerome in 1896, Jennie wasted no time establishing herself as a prominent figure in the little mining town. And despite facing numerous challenges as an immigrant and an unmarried woman, and operating in a male-dominated society, Jennie's entrepreneurial spirit thrived.
To truly understand what Jennie was up against, we need to set the stage. Jerome was nothing but empty desert on the side of a small mountain when three prospectors struck copper. They sold their claims to the United Verde Copper Company, who then set up a small mining camp. They named it Jerome after Eugene Jerome, who was one of the major financiers. But they could never really make much of it. It was just too costly for them. So they sold the mine to William A. Clark in 1888. And that is when things took off. Clark built a smelter and a railroad, and then production boomed. In fact, according to azstateparks.com, by the early 20th century, the United Verde was the largest producing copper mine in the Arizona territory. People flocked to Jerome in droves. By the early 1900s, Jerome housed more than 15,000 residents. So, the town immediately got to work to provide the new miners with the necessities: bars, brothels, and boarding houses. Many of those were one and the same, and one of those such establishments belonged to Jennie Boters. From the article Belgian Jennie Boters, Mining Town Madam by Melanie Sturgeon, on October 21st, 1896, Jennie Boters took out a $1,000 mortgage on lots 20, 21, and 22 along Boarding School Road in Block 11. This was the first indication of her arrival in Jerome. She quickly paid off those mortgages and then purchased lots 4, 5, and part of 6 in Block 1. Jennie built her brothel in Block 1 off Main Street. It had at least 12 rooms, including a saloon on the main floor and sleeping quarters upstairs where her girls lived and took clients. It became known as Jennie's Place. By 1899, the total value of Jennie's property was assessed at $3,575. By 1901, that amount had increased to $6,225. Today, those properties would be worth, well, I don't have an exact amount. I couldn't find an exact amount on those specific buildings, but I do know that homes up there are currently going from anywhere from $400,000 to $900,000, maybe more. So let's just call it a lot. Being the incredibly astute businesswoman that she was, Jennie made sure to protect what she had worked for. In 1897, shortly after she had purchased her first property, Jennie filed a separate property document with the recorder's office. This document was to protect a married woman's personal property from her husband and his creditors. In it, Jennie attested that I now own the above described property and have acquired the same and expended much money thereon while living separate and apart from my husband, that the said property herein is my separate property, that my husband in no way expended any money whatever to aid me in the purchase of said property. And then she filed a will naming her son as her sole heir. So it's quite possible that she did have a husband, but if so, it seems that she did not want him coming back into her life.
Notably, Jennie's resilience was tested by a series of fires that ravaged Jerome, forcing her to rebuild her brothel on many occasions. This was between three great fires between 1897 and 1899, which most of the town actually burnt down.
The brothel pictured here is actually the third iteration of Jennie's place, as the first two burned to the ground in massive fires that nearly destroyed all of Jerome. The initial fire broke out on Christmas Eve of 1897 in an establishment known as Japanese Charlie's, which was another boarding house. There are varying stories as to how it happened, but the result is the same. Someone threw a lamp, starting a fire, and because all of the buildings were wood, the spread of the fire was rapid. It consumed the block. The Connor Hotel was the only building made of brick, so it was spared, but Jennie's was not. She lost $4,000 worth of material possessions, which would be about $150,000 today. She also lost a building that was then valued at $1,500. And to add insult to injury, most of the items that Jennie managed to save from the fire were stolen from her that day or the next, and her insurance would only cover $900 in damages. But Jennie was resilient and she was quick to rebuild. Unfortunately, not even 1 year later, a second fire erupted. And even more unfortunate, no one learned from the first fire, and everyone rebuilt all of their businesses with wood again. Although, even if they had, it might not have saved them. This fire was even worse than the first one. It burned with such intensity that not even the brick buildings were spared this time. To make matters worse, Jerome didn't have an adequate water supply, much less an adequate fire response team. Over $500,000 in damages were reported, and that's in 1898 money. Jennie herself had another $3,500 in damages, but no amount of money could equate to the value of the lives lost. 8 bodies were found among the wreckage, and many more went missing. As if the town of Jerome had not endured enough, there was yet another fire just 8 months later. It started in the Leland Hotel, and it too spread quickly, wiping out much of Jerome for a third time in less than 2 years. After this incident, the city council finally mandated that the businesses be rebuilt from brick and stone. Once again, Jennie quickly rebuilt, and it was back to business as usual. But unfortunately, business as usual in a brothel often means violence. Prostitution is a dangerous occupation. Many of the girls were victims of abuse. Some were even murdered. Eventually, Jennie Botters would be among them. In 1903, Jennie left Jerome and moved to Gold Road in Mojave County. It was another boom town, and Jennie hastily set up a saloon with tents in the back for her girls to live and work. This is where Jennie's life took a turn. It's unclear whether Jennie began a relationship with Clement C. Lee in Gold Road or if he had followed her from Jerome. What we do know is that Jennie was terrified of him. It was reported in the contemporary newspapers that Lee had been living with Jennie and living off of her income. Jennie grew tired of this and tried to end things with Lee, but this only served to anger him. He threatened to kill her. Jennie predicted her own death. Once again, coming from the journal article by Melanie Sturgeon, A.R. Irvine, another waiter who had known Jennie since she first came to Jerome, testified that several days before her death, she had told him that she expected Lee would kill her within 30 days. When Irvine insisted that she was mistaken, Jennie reiterated, "He will kill me just as sure as I am sitting at this table." Despite Jennie's insistence that Lee would try to kill her, no one believed her. On the morning of September 3rd, 1905, Jennie's bartender was cleaning glasses at the bar when he heard a woman screaming and then gunshots. Jennie, still dressed in her nightgown, ran out of the saloon and into the street, where Lee fired again, hitting her in the hip. She fell to the ground. As Lee towered over her, Jennie begged for her life. "For God's sake, don't shoot," she pleaded. But he did. Lee shot her in the head. He left Jennie lying in the street while he went to reload his gun. Upon his return, Lee put his hand on Jennie and asked, "You're not dead yet?" and then fired a final shot behind her ear. Satisfied that Jennie was now dead, Lee turned the gun on himself, firing into his own chest. Waiting for death to come for him, he lay down beside Jennie, pulled his hat down over his face. But death did not come for Lee at this moment. His gunshot wound was a superficial one. Lee was arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Lay faced swift justice, being sentenced to hang for Jennie's murder. Despite appeals and attempts to prove his insanity, the sentence was upheld and Lay was executed on January 18, 1907 in a jail yard in Kingman, Arizona.
Lee was the second person to ever be sentenced to the death penalty in Mojave County. He was hanged. It was said that when his body dropped from the gallows, his head became detached from his spine.
In the aftermath of the murder, the community mourned the loss of Jennie, remembering her as a generous and compassionate woman who supported the needy and disadvantaged in Jerome. In her will, her son Philip was left her considerable wealth and property.
Jennie was memorialized with kind words, remembering her as having a big heart and always helping those in need. But if she was so beloved, it makes one wonder, where was everyone when she needed help? No one believed her when she said that Lee would try to kill her. No one came to her aid when she ran screaming from the saloon, nor when she pleaded for her life while lying in the street. Not even when Lee left her to go reload his gun. Not one person came to help her.
The tragic tale of Jennie, from an immigrant woman to a wealthy entrepreneur, and her violent demise at the hands of the obsessed stalker, remains etched into the history of Mojave County. Her story serves as a reminder of the dark and often unjust realities of the past, along with the resilience and courage of those who face them.
Now, we look back on Jennie Botters with much fondness. We see her as a courageous, hardworking woman with a kind heart, and her boarding house still stands as a testament to the amazing life she lived.
Jennie's Place, also known as Jennie's Hotel, is a historic building located on Main Street near Husband's Alley. Originally constructed in 1924, it was built as a boarding house to accommodate single miners who worked in the nearby United Verde mines. It has since been converted into shops along Main Street. Over the years, the building has undergone various transformations and renovations, and today it stands as a distinctive artist-in-residence hotel where each room is uniquely designed by different artists.
Jennie's Place has changed hands numerous times over the decades, its contents transforming with each iteration. Since 1988, it has been home to the world's largest collection of kaleidoscopes in a cute shop called Nellie Bly. It features dozens of artists and is owned by 2 women, which I think would make Jennie so proud. What once was Jennie's residence has also gone through many changes over the years, but you can still visit the spot today. It is now a hotel and restaurant called the Clinkscale. But we didn't quite finish Jennie's story. In a cruel twist of fate, or maybe just a lack of options, Jennie and her killer were both interred at the Pioneer Cemetery in Kingman. But it gets worse. When the new Mountain View Cemetery opened in 1917, Mojave County began moving all of the bodies from Pioneer Cemetery for a fee. If the deceased family did not pay the fee, the body was left in the old cemetery, which became abandoned. And if Jennie's body being abandoned in the same defunct cemetery as her killer wasn't disrespectful enough, well, it still gets worse. In 1944, Kingman decided to build a school on top of the abandoned cemetery. All of the remaining bodies were dug up and piled together in one large mass grave beneath the football field. With all of the disruptions to Jennie's resting place, it's no wonder that ghost stories about her started cropping up.
As for the reputation of it being haunted, Jennie's Place has become a focal point for the tales of paranormal activity. Visitors, guests, and even some artists who have stayed at the hotel have reported experiencing eerie phenomena that they attribute to spirits of the past. The stories of hauntings at Jennie's Place include guests hearing unexplained noises, witnessing shadowy figures, and encountering cold spots throughout the building. Some speculate that these occurrences may be connected to Jennie herself.
There are many stories about Jennie haunting the Clinkscale, most notably the lariat and lace room. People have also said Jennie likes to move furniture around and has been known to throw things around the kitchen if they aren't put away to her liking. Others have seen and heard a ghostly feline, which is believed to be Jennie's. Both are reported to be friendly spirits. But my favorite story tells of sightings of a woman dressed in a nightgown, carrying a skull as she strolls down the streets of Gold Road before quietly vanishing. If you recall, when Clement Lee was hanged, his head became internally detached from the rest of his body. It was said that when the bodies in Pioneer Cemetery were dug up and moved in 1944, Lee's skull did not travel to the new location with him. His skull was somehow missed and plowed into a nearby wash. So it's a nice little bit of poetic justice to think that Jennie holds on to Lee's skull as a keepsake. That's going to do it for this episode of AZ Unveiled, but as promised, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Tim's new book, Spirits Among the Saguaros. If you love checking out spooky places, and I bet you do, you're going to love this book. Tim has created the ultimate guidebook to all of Arizona's most haunted locations. He lays them all out for you in 10 easy-to-follow road trip recommendations. And he examines the historic backstory of how each haunted location came to be. And you know that's my favorite part. Personally, I'm most excited about his Route 66 guide, or maybe his Haunted Highways guide. Who am I kidding? It's obviously both. So if you'd like to check out Spirits Among the Saguaros, I will leave the link for you below. As a special thank you, anyone watching this video can get 10% off their copy of Spirits Among the Saguaros using code AZ Unveiled. If you'd like to follow Tim on his socials, I will leave those below. Thank you so much for watching another episode of AZ Unveiled. If you have a particular story you'd like to hear about, leave me a comment and let me know. And if it's not too much trouble, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps the channel grow so I can make more videos for you. As always, I'm Emily and I appreciate you so much. Until next time, stay spooky and weird.